Today's webinar is using published materials in a virtual instructional setting. So Steve and Reid, if you guys have been attending any of the English language webinars that we've been doing, you'll know Stephen and what a great presenter he is. But he's going to talk today about just generically using published materials in a virtual setting. How do you use those print materials when you're over Zoom or working at a distance in any kind of way? And it's not just for ELL learners. It's going to be kind of any type of classroom content that you're working in. So today we're going to ask that you use the chat to introduce yourselves as you're doing now. Share links and resources with the group. Danielle's going to be posting links and stuff in there as well. You can ask questions of the group. But if you have questions for Stephen about using materials, published materials in a virtual setting, please use the Q&A feature to post those questions. That helps us track the questions, make sure everybody's questions gets answered. If you post them to the chat, we're likely to miss them because that chat just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. We are recording. About a week after the webinar, you're going to get a follow-up email with a link to the webinar recording. Stephen's going to share his slideshow with you. We're going to have a kind of a summary sheet of the main points that you're hearing about today. That's a great resource to share with your coworkers. We'll include a transcript of the chat and the Q&A, and you'll get a certificate for attending today. You'll also get a separate email with registration links to the coaching sessions. And those of you who not attended these are a really fantastic feature that we're doing as a follow-up to these webinars. So about 2 to 4 weeks after the webinar, you can sign up for a coaching session. There'll be up to about 10 participants in the coaching session. And it's just an opportunity to ask questions of the webinar presenter and others in the group. Following the first webinar in this track around using published materials, that webinar was on using materials in a open entry, open exit classroom. And I had an opportunity to do the coaching sessions, and we had a lot of great discussions about different features to look for in materials, some recommendations for materials from the people participating in the coaching session, and just things that were really built and strategies for working in an open entry, open exit classroom. And Stephen, I know you've had some great interactions with the small group coaching sessions as well.
Yes, during my first round of coaching sessions, it was really fantastic to get to spend a little more time doing a bit of a deep dive into the subject that we were talking about and getting to talk in more depth with the attendees from the webinar. A lot of times on our end, we're just looking at our screen and we don't get to really interact as much as we'd like. But in the coaching sessions, it's just such a great opportunity with the small group that we can spend time kind of digging in and really discussing what's working and what's not. And they've had enough time with the material to kind of use some of it in their classroom, and then they can come back and talk about what they've been doing and what's working, what's not for them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the other thing I want to remind folks about is the material scholarships. And you may not remember this, but we do have some scholarships for anyone participating in the Teacher Training Plus project. And what these are scholarships for classroom sets of New Readers Press materials. We're focused on kind of basic literacy materials. So those are going to be Laubach Way to Reading, Challenger, or Journey to Success. And the idea behind it is that especially in this published materials session, we know that a lot of times tutors and teachers have materials that the program has already purchased. They're kind of say, here, use these materials to work with your student. And as we're talking about some of the features to look for to make things easier, working in a multi-level classroom, virtual setting, things like that, you may look at those materials and say, well, these are not really set up for that. If you want to try something else, this is a way to do that. So you can, and you'll get this slide in the follow-up, but you click on that link. It is going to, and you can find that link also on our Teacher Training Plus page down at the bottom. But if you click that link, it's going to take you to our grant interface portal. When you log on, you're going to enter, well, and I need to close that, and I need to become an applicant. And you're going to be able to click on apply and enter TTP up here in this entry code. And that's going to give you the application. So I can click here and apply. It's just a couple of questions. What materials do you want? Why did you pick them? That just helps us kind of make sure you've picked materials that match your needs. And then there is an order form, real easy for you to fill out and send it in. Like I said, the order is $900 worth of materials, and then the remaining money covers shipping and handling. So you can see, like, I filled out a sample one. I can get 7 classroom sets of level 1, level 2, and level 3 of Laubach Way to Reading, plus some teacher's guides and some focus on phonics materials. Similar things for Challenger or for Journey to Success. So encourage you guys to take advantage of that. We've got about 40 grand in that scholarship money, and that's available until we run out of money. So the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to get the materials. And a question, how do you determine who gets the scholarships? It's really whoever applies. And we make sure that, you know, kind of the materials you're asking for meet the needs you've described. But as long as it does that, you're going to get it, Joanne. So go ahead and apply right now. And now with that, I'm going to turn things over to Stephen so he can get started with the presentation. Stephen, I'll stop sharing and let you share your screen.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Let me get that. Okay, everybody seeing the my agenda?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. As Todd said, my name is Stephen Reid. I am the program manager for Literacy Volunteers, Charlottesville, Albemarle, and I am really excited about giving this presentation today. This is something that we at my center, we dove into very heavily, very early on, and so we wanted to make sure that everybody felt comfortable working in a virtual platform. And so we have spent a lot of time talking about what it is that the that our volunteers are needing as they're progressing. And so what we've discovered is there tends to be 3 different areas that the groups are falling into. Those who have good technology on both sides, those who have the good technology and skills only on one end, and those who don't have great technology and or skills on either end. So I'm going to be looking at everything from those 3 points of view. And then we're also going to be dealing with copyright laws and how that's going to affect what it is that you're going to be able to do and still make sure that you're following the law. So let's see. Before we dig in too deeply, I want you to remember that within a class, if you have more than one student, so those who are working one-on-one, it's not going to necessarily apply to you. But if you have a full class, you're going to have those students in there who are just amazing with Zoom, and those who are just logging in for the first time and have never used Zoom before. So you need to keep that in mind, that you need to make sure that you're staying engaged with the experts while not completely losing the beginners. So that's something that it's always kind of a balance when you're in a multi-level classroom, but that multi-level also applies to their digital literacy skills, not just their reading skills or their math skills or their English language skills. So that's one more level that you have to be thinking about, is making sure that you're following and helping those who need it, while not having those who are really comfortable get totally bored and moving on. So let's spend a little time talking about that best case scenario, when everybody has great technology skills and they have the technology. You both have good equipment that you can use, you both know how to use it, and everything is going to be just perfect every single time, right? That's the dream. So we have dug into several different platforms, and we really find that these are the three that most people are using. Zoom does seem to be everywhere these days, that everybody is comfortable, or at least familiar enough with Zoom that they can jump on if they need to. The disadvantage that we find is that 40 time limit is back. Whenever everyone was locked down, they had opened that up to everyone, but then they've gotten back to that 40-minute limit. So the ways around that, if you feel that it is valuable to you, you can pay for that, the extended version that allows you to get in for an unlimited amount of time. I know here in my center, we have 9 accounts that we have available for our volunteers to use that do not have that time restriction. And I think we have right now about 20 or 25 of our volunteers who are using one of our accounts. We have a volunteer coordinator who keeps the calendar of who's using which account and on what days they're using it. So it's not like every volunteer needs their own. We have, I think, 3 or 4 who share an account, so that they have that, as long as they don't try to overlap and they don't move their lessons around without checking with the others first. It's quite easy for them to all share that one Zoom account. And don't worry about, oh, what happens if Zoom finds out we've got more than one doing it? We checked with them in advance. Is it okay for us to have multiple people sharing an account based on the one-on-one tutoring that we do? And they're like, yeah, sure, that's great. And they worked with us about how many they thought we would need and helped us pick a number that was going to be right for our organization. Another option is Google Meet. The advantage here, it's super easy to use, especially for Gmail users, because they already have access to the G Suite stuff, and so they can get in very easily. The disadvantage I see is a little iffy that it's even a disadvantage, but some of the tools are not quite as seamless as they are in Zoom. Like, for example, Jamboards or Google Docs, you have to jump into a different program in order to use those. And so it's a bit more like screen sharing an external source as opposed to the whiteboard in Zoom, which is part of the platform. And that's being a little nitpicky to call that a disadvantage. So there are, like, Google Meet is a very good option. WhatsApp, if you haven't used WhatsApp, I would recommend you familiarize yourself with it, particularly if you're working with English language learners, because internationally it does seem to be the most commonly used chat app outside of China, I think. It does seem to be one that most of our international students are familiar with already. I think the biggest disadvantage here is that it is indeed a chat app. That's what it's designed to do. And so there aren't that many add-ons to it. But it does have some features that we really like. For example, like if you're sharing a photo in the chat, you can actually tag comments or messages to that one photo. You know how, like what Todd was saying earlier about the chat here, it just keeps scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you kind of can lose things sometimes. But this, you can actually tag the message back to what it is you're referring to, and so that thread kind of sticks together, and it makes it a little bit easier to follow. So there are some things about WhatsApp that are good, that can be useful, but like I said, it is designed as a chat app and not necessarily a teaching app. One of the other things that I have found whenever you're using published materials, a lot of times you want to be able to show your student what it is you're working on, and one of the best ways to do that is to create a document camera using your phone. Back when I was teaching in the classroom, I had the little electronic device. I could set it up, and I put my textbook underneath it, and I could write in it and show it up on the board behind me, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I used it all the time. But you can do that same thing with your phone. You just have to, if you're working on Zoom, make sure that you install Zoom onto your phone. And it's best if you can log into it with a different email address. But I don't think that's necessary, but it will kind of keep them sorted for you as you're looking at everything. Also, make sure you mute your phone when you do this. And this is definitely one of those do as I say, not as I did situations, because the feedback loop that will create is not much fun. So don't do it the way I did it. Make sure you mute your phone before you get started. And then when you log in to your Zoom, make sure you also send that link to whatever email that your phone is logged into, and you log in that, and you log in on your computer, and you can use the camera on your phone as your document camera. Also, if your student has two devices and wants to do the same, they could also log in a second time and be able to show you their homework and such using their phone while still talking to you on camera. So this is literally how I had it set up. I have a stack of textbooks, and then my phone, and then the book I'm working out of underneath that pile of books. And so you can see this isn't high tech. It doesn't take some fancy high tech equipment in order to create a document cam like this. It's literally one of those times where you work with what you have, and so you can make a document camera just by using the equipment you're currently using. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind is don't forget about the chat. And right now we've got a lot of people adding things like where they're from and what program they're in into the chat. But it can do a lot more than that. You can use it as an opportunity for your students to write responses to practice questions. You can have them put the answer into the chat. They can have it be sent to everyone if it's kind of an open forum discussion. Or if you want individual responses, you can have them send the message directly to you so that it only goes to the host. That way you're the only one who sees it, and they're not sharing it with everybody. And so it gives you that opportunity to have them do some writing in addition to the speaking and listening practice. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be a one person talking the whole time type situation. Don't think it has to be just short words or phrases. They can use this for complete sentences. They could even write full paragraphs and submit it into the chat. So giving them the opportunity to practice a bit of a longer writing. And so that is an option that you have even within the online formats that we're using. Something like Jamboards is fantastic for this kind of work as well. Basically, it's an electronic whiteboard. If you've never used it, it's part of that Google Workplace. It is one of the free aspects of the Google Workplace. The great thing that I like about it is that you can create multiple slides before class. One of the problems that I had found early in when working with Zoom is I didn't really have the option to do a lot of creating on the whiteboard in advance. So on this, I can create them all, and then when we share that document with the class, I have everything there. This is one of those times where I found it particularly useful. That ability to create it all in advance was particularly useful when I was teaching math. And I would have all of the math problems I wanted to do for that class already programmed onto the board. And I know that before I was doing that, I spent so much time just writing problems on the board and making sure I'd written it all correctly. By being able to program it in advance, it really is helpful. If you want more info on Jamboards, ProLiteracy has done a nice YouTube video that you can watch, and it's linked right there in this this slide. So you'd be able to jump over and watch that when you get these slides back to you. But I do recommend watching that video because it'll really help you up your game when using Jamboards. Also, Google Docs, that's another great thing. Particularly if you want your students to be writing longer pieces, like if they're working on essays or something like that, if your textbook has them writing, paragraphs or longer responses, putting them into Google Docs is a great way to do that. The nice thing about that is it allows the teacher to share their document with the whole class. So the teacher can put in all the notes they need to for the day, then they can share it with the class, and the students get to see your notes as you're going through the lesson. But also whenever they are sending homework back to you, it allows you to edit that document or to comment on that document. And so you can make notes and corrections directly in the document that your student sends to you. That'll give you the opportunity to correct their homework electronically. Other activities, don't feel like you're stuck doing just the the situation like I'm stuck with right now, where it's just I have the presentation up and I'm talking and you're listening. Most of the time, whenever you have a regular size class and not the 112 people that I have in here, you want it to be a lot more interactive. And so things like Quizlet or Kahoot are great for being able to do that. You can, there are both free and paid versions of Quizlet and Kahoot. And there are some extra little bells and whistles that you get that are behind that paywall, but you can do a lot with before you even get into that section. So you can create quizzes and puzzles and things like that from the free account, and that's really fantastic. The other nice thing about it is it has an app version and a web-based version. So you can use the web-based version to do your creating, which is a little bit easier, but you can then use the app version for your students to work from, because on their end, the app version might be a little bit easier for them to use, particularly if they're working off of a tablet or a phone. Homework's always a challenge when you're working electronically. But keep in mind, it's something that can be sent via email. It can be sent via text. If you have to have them take a picture of it and email it to you. And then you can also set up homework in Google Forms or Quizlet or Kahoot. have them do something like that, where they can submit their homework in an electronic form. So that's one of those things that it can get a little tricky for you to how to get homework back and forth. But there's a lot of ways to do it electronically that can really make it easier. Okay. One of the things that I like to do when I'm grading homework, particularly if I'm working out of something like Google Docs, is I like to use a highlighter system. And this is something that you're going to have to train your students on because it's a little bit tricky. But what we do is I use a highlighter system so that anytime the problem is word order, it's highlighted in blue, or if it's subject verb agreement, it's in yellow, or run-ons are in purple, or sentence fragments are in green, spelling mistakes are in red. And so they have this little chart available to them, but then whenever I'm grading the homework, I'll just highlight the problem. Then they have to go back and fix it. So it gives them a little more practice of figuring out what the problem is themselves. They know it's this type of problem. They have to figure out where exactly the problem is and then how to make that correction on their own. And I find that with more advanced students, this is a great way to do it. It gives them the opportunity to practice their own editing skills and what they need to do to go back and fix and revise a longer piece of writing, so that in the future they're going to be more aware of, oh wait, this is a problem I have, so I need to pay attention to that. So that's something that you can work with your kind of advanced students. And like I said, it is something that you need to kind of train them in the practice of doing this, so that it becomes a little more second nature to them. Okay. Then we get to the situation where we have one side of the equation has good technology and skills, and the other not so much. Or as I say, well, it could be worse. Whenever you're looking at this, I think that you should first be thinking, is the problem that a lack of technology, or is the problem a lack of skill? So if it is a skill problem, then what you need to be doing is each lesson spends a little bit of time working on one new skill. And I would just try to stick with one new skill each lesson. So, spending a little bit of time practicing, how do I put a response in the chat? How do I type into the whiteboard? How do I annotate on the whiteboard? How do I share a document? How do I share my screen? How do I circle or highlight something in a shared document? And each of these times, spend a little bit of time practicing on one new skill, so that they have that opportunity to develop those skills. Developing skills electronically, developing digital skills electronically is really tough. And so, because if they don't know how to do it, it's hard to teach them through the device that you're wanting them to do that skill in. So I understand that this can be a big challenge. So the problem that I see most in this situation is it's where the student only has a phone. And what happens there is you're sharing a document that has a lot of text on it. They're looking at a tiny, tiny screen, and so they can't really see what it is that you're trying to show them without a lot of scrolling or trying to zoom in and out. And it makes it very difficult because they're looking at a full page of text on a very tiny screen. So that's something that I think you need to keep in mind whenever you're creating your slides, is how many words are on your screen. Do not overload the content on a single slide, so that it is something they can easily see. But there are some things that students can do on phones that that you need to be able to keep in mind whenever you're creating your content. They can watch videos, they can listen to podcasts. So take your lesson and turn it into a YouTube video, or record it to a podcast, so that they can still listen, still participate, but they may not be able to see everything you're doing. You just have to be really careful whenever you're putting any text in there that it is in a format that they can see. Also, using those apps like Quizlet or Kahoot will make a big difference as well, because the way the app is set up, it's going to help with that text size, so that they can read it easier. I do realize this requires a lot of upfront work from the teacher. It has you doing a lot of extra lesson, as in recording the lesson beforehand. And so that prep time is what makes this a little more difficult. But what you need to be thinking about is, how can you record that lesson in a easy unit for them to be able to read through or to participate with. And so I would spend some time chunking that your material down into small pieces, because in general, somebody's not going to want to watch a 45-minute video for a lesson, but they will watch 5, 8, or 9-minute videos, which will give you the same amount of material, but in easily digestible pieces. So by doing it in small videos and really kind of focusing on a single skill, or if you're working out of a textbook where you're just working off of one page, and just do that during one of your episodes that's 8 to 9 minutes long. Rarely do I think that you should go over the 10-minute mark. I really would make that a hard and fast wall and kind of lock it below 10 minutes. Kind of that 8 to 9 minutes seems to be a sweet spot. And so you can chunk those lessons down into kind of bite-sized pieces, and just kind of really focusing on a single skill, or maybe at most 2 skills within a single episode. Also, a lot of what I'm talking about is assuming that your student has a paper copy of the textbook. So I'm assuming that you have a classroom set of the textbooks so that they can see the textbook in front of them while they're listening to you. But if you're working in that podcast format and they're having trouble reading along because the text is so small in what you're doing, I think it's important to use a lot of signposts so that that the student knows where you are on the page. So, okay, we're at the top of page 27, and you say 27 several times so that they know exactly where you are on what page and then on what part of the page. So it makes it a little bit easier for them to follow along if they're really not able to see very much because they're working off of that tiny screen. But they can still hear and they can read along in the textbook. And as long as you keep those signposts going, they'll be able to follow along a lot better. If you decide you do want to give the YouTube channel or podcast a try, which I do recommend, remember that even with your student having very limited technology, they can still watch YouTube. So you can actually just record the lesson exactly as you taught it and then post it up onto a private YouTube channel and then share that link with your students. And so nobody's watching it except the people in your class. And you can go in and add timestamps. That's not very difficult to do in the platform. So you can, when you upload the video, you can mark the timestamps if you'd like. And with that, you're like, and at this point in the lesson, we were working on this skill. And at this point in the lesson, we were working on this skill. And you can keep doing that so that they can navigate through quite easily and be able to see, okay, I just want to practice this one type of math problem, and this is the point where they were that the teacher was working on that, so they can just jump to that point without having to watch through the whole thing. It also means you don't have to go through and edit an hour-long class down into a bunch of smaller videos. You can just put it up whole, and they can watch the pieces that are most important to them. Okay. And that kind of leads us into the worst case scenario, or as Tim Gunn would say, the make it work category. What happens whenever there aren't good technology or skills on either end? So I jumped way ahead. So in this case, planning is key. Without a doubt, planning is key. You need to make sure that you have a textbook, a set of textbooks for everyone in the class, and then a very detailed syllabus that they get and that you follow of what happens during each lesson. What are you going to be able to create that will help them supplement? Are there podcasts? Are there videos that they can watch? When are assignments due? How do they drop those assignments off? All of those things need to be in the syllabus so that they can follow along. This is really kind of that old school correspondence course type situation where they take the lesson home, they work on it pretty much by themselves, and then they bring it back to you and you grade it. If you're going to be trying something like this, make those drop-off spots as convenient as possible, multiple locations if you can, and then have next week's assignment ready, last week's assignment graded so they can pick those up at the same time. And keep in mind, the postal system is always there. They can, the postal system goes where Comcast and Ting don't necessarily go. So those who have students out in more rural areas, you may want to be thinking about something like that. Is it ideal? Nope. None of this is the best case scenario. We all know best case scenario is having that student in your class, but for those who that's not an option, this is another way to go. Okay. The thing that you need to keep in mind with this type of teaching is what your timing expectations are. It's going to take a lot longer to do absolutely everything. So if it's something that you might cover in a week in an in-person class or an online class, it could take a month when dealing with the postal system or drop-off points. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you're keeping your expectations realistic. And finally, the last section I want to look at are copyright laws. And for the most part, what we're talking about is the fair use section of the copyright laws, which says that in certain situations, you can copy material and use it in class without requiring further permission from whoever owns the copyright. There's a 4-part test that will demonstrate if it is actually fair use for what you're doing. The first one is that you are a nonprofit educational situation, and we all are, and that you do not charge your students for those photocopies. So you're not making copies of pages and then selling those pages to your students, because that's you profiting off of somebody else's work. You can't do that. The second part is the nature of the material, that you're using only what is needed for your lesson, and that if the material that you are copying isn't from a consumable book, if it is something that is designed for the student to write in a workbook of some sort that is designed for them to write and use and then would not be usable again, those are the things that you cannot make photocopies because that is going to be kind of hampering their sales, which is what copyright is protecting. Okay. And then test number 3 is the amount. You can use, paragraphs and pages out of a book. You cannot copy the entire book. Okay. And then this is the one that probably kind of encapsulates all of them. So really be thinking about, if I am making copies, is this harming the market for that book? Is the book reasonably available and affordable to the students? If it is, then they need to buy that book. And so you wouldn't be able to make photocopies that way. So this is probably the one that is the one for you to keep in mind the most as you're making copies. If I am just making copy after copy of the pages, of all the pages in the book, that's harming the market, and that's something that is going to violate the copyright laws. Okay, so that takes me to any questions. I know that there were a few, and I'm going to stop my share. Okay, so I did see a few questions come up while I was talking. So let's see what we've got. My tutie has problems seeing what I'm trying to show her via Zoom. Yes, that is without a doubt the biggest problem we have. And I think that what you need to make sure that you're doing is reducing the amount that you're trying to show at one time, because she's probably working on a very, very tiny screen. And if you could, make sure that, like, if it is something that's just like a page of text, what I'd recommend there is you get that, you print out that in advance and you email it to her, as opposed to so that she can see it in advance. He or she can see it in advance, and they can have it in a larger format. But working off of just a small screen is always going to be a challenge. And so thinking about the amount of material that you're showing on the screen, and then what you can do to either send it in advance or reformat it so there's fewer words on the page. Next, if you have multiple instruction times with similar information, why not just record the class and share that? Yeah, definitely. That could be really, really useful. And that's one of the things that you could do that in advance and share the recording with with all of your classes, and they could watch it in advance, and then they come to you and you use your class time similar to what I'm doing with the coaching sessions. That's where they bring questions to you, and they've already watched the lesson, and they can just come to you for extra practice, or they can bring in the questions that they may already have. So that is something, it's kind of a flipped classroom model where they learn the material in advance, and then they spend time with you practicing what they learned from that recording. So I think that's a wonderful idea. Is copying a whole chapter fair use? It's a little iffy in that that's kind of that line where we're starting to get more into the copying too much of the document as opposed to having them buy the book. So if you're going to be working out of a very long novel, for example, copying a chapter could be okay, but I would think it would be a little on the iffy side. If you're needing an entire chapter's worth of materials, first of all, I would ask, why are you wanting that much information out of it? And if that's the case, if you're wanting to read the whole book, then have them read the whole book.
Yeah, Stephen, if I can add to that, I think just a good rule of thumb is if you're copying something so you don't have to buy something, that's bad. If you're copying something because you already own it, but you need to make it like more usable in a virtual setting, that's generally okay. So in answer to, I think it was Neil's question, if you're copying an entire chapter, but it's because everybody already has the book and you just want to make sure that when you're, you have a need to share certain parts of that chapter, over Zoom, and you want to be able to do that easily. I think that's probably not an issue, provided you've purchased the book as well as you've purchased a book for each one of your students and they have the books with them.
Right. I think that's exactly right. Where you, if you were wanting to just have them be able to see what it is they're exactly you're working on. For example, if you wanted to make copies of some pages and you're highlighting certain sections so that they can see the parts that you want to highlight, but they have their copy that they're working out of on their end. They already have it at home. So they're able to highlight what you're highlighting, then in that case, yeah, I think you're fine.
Yeah.
But if it's, I'm making, a classroom set of this chapter so that I don't have to buy a classroom set, that's a no.
No good. Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Okay, is using worksheets to upload to a digital classroom from places like education.com that provides free classroom downloads on their website a violation of copyright law? Typically, if the website is designed for you to download it for use in your classroom, it would likely give you the right to do that in an electronic setting as well. So most of the time, whenever you have that, like you can, most of those free lesson sharing websites will actually tell you what the copyright is on it, that you can use it in this way, but not that way. And most of the time what those say is something along the lines of, you can use this in your class as much as you want, but you can't take this lesson and put it in a book and publish it yourself and make money off of this idea. And so that's what those are, the copyright usually attached to those involves. So what you want to be doing is thinking about, as you are downloading it from whatever that website is, check their specifics. Most of the time you're going to be fine. What about digitizing an entire resource for Zoom presentations, but making sure each student has a paper copy as well? Okay, so this one, I am not a legal expert on this one. I would think that since it's you bought your copy, your students have all bought their copy, and you are working through it electronically, and so you have copies in, I would think you're going to be okay. But that one, because it's an entire document, that's where it's always tricky. But yes, I hate to say yes or no fully on this, but I think that you would be okay because you have a paper copy, all of your students have a paper copy. But I would definitely, that's one I would probably check with the publisher and say, hey, is it okay if I do this? But I think you'd probably be okay. I think they would likely say yes, but in that situation, I'd likely check with the publisher.
Yeah, and let me just reiterate, a lot of times you can email publishers those specific questions. They have places where you can email and they're pretty good at responding. Yeah.
Right. I've always found most of the time that I have written to a publisher about, or a content creator of any kind about that situation. I'm like, I work for a nonprofit adult literacy organization. Anything that follows that, they're like, yeah, sure, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
They really have been extremely generous with helping us in any way like that. So I would say just reach out to the publisher.
Yeah. And again, if most of the time, as long as you have not been making copies to avoid purchasing books, if you've been doing something like that and then you check with the publisher, they're just going to say, don't do that anymore. We'd appreciate it if you didn't do that anymore. You're not going to get in any kind of big trouble. But again, really the guiding principle is do not copy things so that you don't have to buy things.
And don't copy things and sell them.
And don't copy things and sell them. And that can also apply. You need to be careful if you charge for your courses. So even if you're not buying even if you're not selling the actual material that you're using, but you are charging for your courses, you might be in a problem there. I think that's all the questions we have.
I think so. Actually, there was one other thing that I meant to mention early on that I realized that I had not covered is dealing with that 40-minute time limit on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
How do you get around it? A lot of times another aspect I'd look at whenever I use that 40-minute time limit as a nice time for a break. So have that's a good time to go refill your coffee cup and take a bit of a break and then log back in. And like Neil just said in the Q&A, Google Meet doesn't have a time limit. Just saying, you might want to look at Google Meet. But with that Zoom time limit, you can, it gives you a chance to take a break. Also, it gives you a chance to have your student do a little bit of practice. So, okay, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. During that time, I want you to watch this 5-minute video and then work on these 3 problems. And then you'll log back into this, the same link from before, and we'll get started again. So it gives them a chance to take a break, but it also gives them a chance to do some of the outside homework or outside work, or the type of work where what they need to do is just sit down and write that paragraph. So it gives them the opportunity to do that. And then, 15, 20 minutes later, they log back in, and then you can can talk about the practice they've been doing. Okay, in the Q&A, I'm referring to what Emmy said. I didn't notice a response to my question before about scholarships for Zoom accounts.
So I can take that one, Stephen, if you'd
Please
like.
do,
So yes,
I
so Pro Literacy during the pandemic, Pro Literacy was able to offer some discounted Zoom licenses. We weren't able to continue that process. Just doing some quick searching, there were TechSoup.org is generally a great place if you're a nonprofit to go for discounted licenses. I did notice that they had some offers for Zoom discounted licenses. They are not the individual licenses. They're more the small business licenses where you are purchasing 10 or 50 or 100 licenses for your organization. But they did have an offer for that. So if you're running a program and you're thinking, I need 10 licenses that I can share with my 40 or 50 tutors, that might be a place to go, TechSoup.org. And I think I responded to that earlier in the chat. I did see some other places with coupons for discounted licenses. I've never dealt with any of those, but we've purchased licenses from TechSoup. They're a reputable organization. So hope that helps, Kate.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're crawling up on to the top of the hour. Got a couple minutes left. Do we have any other questions that you have for me?
And while we're waiting to see if anybody has any more questions, I just want to remind you again to take advantage of the signing up for the small group coaching sessions. So that email is going to be coming out. Also, you'll see the links in the slideshow that Stephen shares, as well as taking advantage of that scholarship for published materials. So I think that's it, Stephen. So we'll say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Great presentation. And everybody have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.